Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional with a deep understanding of leadership and people strategy from Calgary, Canada, Lindsay White. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Lindsay is a leadership and people strategy expert, and she's the founder of High Voltage Leadership. So let me start by asking you my first question. Tell me about your journey and what first convinced you that scaling a business is fundamentally a leadership challenge and not just an operational one.
Yeah, it's such a great place to start. So, what I often see is very successful individuals who have lots of really deep knowledge and experience. Perhaps they've worked in corporate and decided to leave for one reason or another.
Mhm.
And they're really passionate about what they do. They deeply, feel very deeply about their product or the service they offer. But the tricky part becomes when they are challenged with growth,
Hmm.
whether that's growth that they plan or growth that happens. Maybe it's very organic. And what I see so frequently is as the founder, as the expert, it is truly that struggle to step out of the space where we have expertise, where
Hmm.
we have deep knowledge, and where our passion really lives,
Hmm.
to actually start to be in other roles
Hmm.
like the CEO
Hmm.
so that our business can grow. And it is really tricky for people to not always be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
And we're so passionate about these businesses
Well
that
said.
it's challenging.
Yeah, well said. Why do so many founders struggle to transition from an entrepreneur to a true CEO?
Yeah. Well, because they are, first of all, different skill sets, second of all, different mindsets,
Hmm.
and third, require us to show up in a different way.
Hmm.
So, as an entrepreneur, it's very exciting. There's lots of risk. As a CEO, in fact, our job is to manage the risk very carefully.
Right.
When we're an entrepreneur, it's all about the shiny things, new ideas, new experiences,
Hmm.
creativity, and innovation.
Hmm.
It's not that that isn't an element of being a CEO, but the
Hmm.
truth is you're shepherding the business. You're enrolling people in the vision and you are nurturing the culture in an organization in an entirely different way.
Right.
And it is messy transitioning from being an entrepreneur and a founder to being a CEO and a really successful senior leader.
Hmm. Great response. And therefore, a follow-up question for you. What are the earliest warning signs that a founder has outgrown their current leadership style?
Yeah. I think the number one biggest red flag is when a leader can't stop touching it, when they're
Hmm.
micromanaging,
Yeah.
when they're inserting themselves in places where they actually know they don't belong, but it's a little bit compulsive
Hmm.
for them to get involved. And I have a client right now that is exactly that.
Hmm.
She is absolutely brilliant, and yet she can't stop mixing in and letting the people that she's hired actually deliver the work and be the
Hmm.
experts.
Yeah.
And her information, her expertise is still valuable, but she goes too deep. And actually, what she does is really stirs the pot and creates more chaos than she
Hmm.
solves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And that's probably the reason a lot of high-performing founders become bottlenecks in their own businesses,
Yes, it is. It
right?
really is. It
Wonderful.
really is.
So my next question is, in your experience, what causes growth to stall more often? Is it weak strategy or weak people leadership?
Yeah. I would argue that it's a combination of both. Because what happens when we're talking strategy, we're really thinking about business strategy.
Mhm.
And what is not in that equation is the people strategy. How do you connect the talent, the humans, to the outcomes?
Mhm.
And so often when we're talking business strategy, we've left that part out. And that is critical. The people add all the value. And then the second part, of course, is that we are thinking about leadership far too late. We are not truly pausing to understand what is it that these humans who add all the value
Right.
require from me or from us as a leadership team to actually deliver their best. So I think it's really a combination of both.
Amazing. And would you have an example of someone without any names, of course?
Of course, I would never reveal my clients. So I'm working with a client right now, and they have a pretty robust business strategy. But the truth is, what they don't have is that talent plan. They really hire simply to plug gaps. They don't have the programs or systems in place. So, for example, they don't really have an understanding of how they manage performance and how managing performance actually connects to a compensation strategy, how they pay and reward people. And that is a huge gap.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have a founder that is elevating to a CEO. The organization is poised for dramatic growth. And that's making the founder feel very excited and very nervous all at the same time. And so the work we're doing encompasses both, because without a people strategy, without the right systems to support the talent and create performance, spaces of performance, they're not going to grow. And without a CEO to lead that, they're going to be in trouble.
Great response. Let's see, the other question I've often observed, asked people, and I've observed that culture in an organization grows based on what the founder sets it to be or attempts to set it to be.
Yeah.
How can founders build a culture that grows with the company instead of breaking under pressure?
Yeah. I think that's a fabulous question. It starts with, we don't think about culture until a little bit later in our business journey. And in fact, I think there's work to be done up front. And of course, our organizational culture is a reflection of our personal values. What do we care about? And we bring that into the company.
Right.
But what needs to happen is the context and the connotation. So I'll give you an example, because often I work with entrepreneurs that have a value of integrity, doing the right thing even when nobody's watching.
Sure.
But when we bring that into our business, the connotation shifts. And in a business context, integrity often means doing the right thing because it's the right thing for our client, even if it's not always profitable or not the most highly profitable.
Yeah.
And so we need to be clear about the values so that we can articulate behaviors. So if we do the right thing, even when it's not the highest profit, what does that look like for someone who's in customer experience, or for someone who's in systems design, or for someone who is creating the program or in sales? We have to be clear about the behavior that we want demonstrated. And then we can talk about that's our culture. And how do we all contribute to our culture of performance and excellence? That conversation is deeply powerful for the business, but also for individuals in the business.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Tell me, what are some of the common hiring mistakes founders make during rapid growth phases?
Yeah. I think the number one thing I see is they use the breath test in hiring, otherwise known as the pulse test. Do you have a pulse? You're hired.
Yeah.
And in fact, we need to take a steady and measured and systematic approach to our hiring. We need to be sure that people don't just have skills and experience, but they have cultural fit, that they have the right attitude and approach, that they have similar values, and they express those values in the right way in their behaviors. That's problem number one. Problem number two is we don't clarify our roles and our swim lanes. So we get a bunch of people that are all overlapping and bumping into each other. And that creates real inefficiency, real friction, and actually chaos. And what we get is frustration. and
Mm.
we spin our wheels. And then what happens, of course, is I see founders where they're left with incredible anxiety and
Mm.
overwhelm,
Mm.
frustration. Why aren't people being accountable?
Right.
Why aren't they taking ownership?
Mm.
Because they don't know what belongs to them. It's
Correct.
like when we take our kids to kindergarten and we put their names on their backpacks, we need to give people a name on their backpack and then fill the backpack with the things that they need to perform. And we
Absolutely.
don't do that. And it
Mm.
gets in the way of our growth.
Absolutely. Well said. How should leaders handle loyal early employees who may no longer fit the next stage of growth? And I've seen this
Yeah.
many times.
Yes, I'm sure you have.
Mm.
I'm sure you have. It happens all the time.
Mm.
So I think the key part here is to treat those people with dignity and kindness
Mm.
and to honor the contribution that they've made to the organization.
Mm.
And even if it means they need to exit and find a different role because the role just doesn't exist in the organization today like it did 6 or 8 months ago, what we need to do is have real, honest conversations. And we, as the leader, we need to lean in to the difficult conversation,
Mm.
knowing that it's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt us, but we
Yep.
need to be courageous and have the right conversations, say the things that need to be said, and talk about their contribution. Here's where they've built things. Here's where they've developed things.
Mm.
Here's where they've had an incredible value.
Mm.
And give that individual as much time as you can to
Mm.
transition. No,
Mm.
don't walk into the office and say your job's gone in 2 weeks. That is an incredible slap in the
Yeah.
face to people.
Yeah.
I would like to give you a month or 6 weeks. The work that you're doing here, I think we both recognize
Mm.
things have changed. If you've hired smart people, they know. But you need to be brave and lead the conversation and do it in a way that they can leave and move to their next job with dignity.
Absolutely.
That's key.
Yeah. I think the key word you've spoken about is dignity, and that's so important in any role. Thank you,
Crucial.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Moving on, what separates healthy high performance cultures from toxic hustle cultures?
Yeah. Well, I think, you even in your language there, you articulated it. It is that over hustling, the overstimulated, the
Mm.
overachieving. Listen, we all want excellence. We all want to perform. And I think if we're doing it right, our teams do too. We
Yeah.
know we have goals that we want to achieve.
Mm.
We also need to have spaces where we have fun and
Mm.
we laugh together. We forget about that in our
Yeah.
growing businesses. We
Mm.
got to have some joy. We also need to make sure that people are doing work that they feel is impactful and fulfilling. And we need to honor rest.
Mm.
People were never built, and our nervous systems were never built to be
Mm.
on 24/7, 365.
Mm.
We are more productive, we're more creative, we're more innovative, and we're more engaged after we can have some solid rest. Now, that
Mm.
might mean we need 8 hours sleep. It also might mean we need to go and step outside for 15 minutes and get some sunshine on our face.
Correct.
We're all just houseplants with more complicated emotions. A
Mm.
little water and a little sun and some vitamins go a long way.
Absolutely.
But we have to recognize where we are hyper achieving, hyper active, and we have to consciously choose to step
Mm.
that back because actually that gets us nowhere. And
Mm.
I say that as someone who has done that. I have actively been in that space. It did me zero good and it didn't help me grow my business at all.
Amazing. What role does emotional intelligence play in modern leadership?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, just to start off with, being emotionally intelligent means in the language of the kids nowadays, what's the vibe?
Mm.
Right? What is the vibe? And
Mm.
and just pausing long enough to just recognize what is showing up in the environment, in the conversation, in the team,
Mm.
and being a little bit sensitive. Now, I'm not talking about you got to be an emotional mind reader.
Yeah.
Nobody can do that.
Mm.
But what we can do is put aside our own feelings
Yeah.
for just a moment so
Mm.
that we can tap into, hey, what's going on underneath the surface? What's not being said here?
Yeah.
And if we can do that effectively, and we can address the elephant in the room without pulling the blanket off the elephant,
Mm-hmm.
we can be a really successful leader. We can really tap into what is happening for our team and how to get them to a space where they are high performing.
Mm. Well said. Moving on, Lindsay, I want to now get your perspective on female founders. And I've
Yeah,
spoken to many, and they often say expectations from female founders are different from expectations from male founders. So I want to
interesting.
ask you, how can female founders navigate leadership expectations that are often different from those placed on men?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think whether you're in Canada, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in South Asia, we have cultural pieces. And in a
Correct.
lot of those spaces, the
Yeah,
expectation for women is different. Not only are we building businesses, we're also often building families. We're
correct.
caretakers.
Correct.
And that is culturally normal in a lot of spaces. And so we do. Women as founders carry some burdens that perhaps our male counterparts do not.
Mhm.
And what I think is most important is that we actually find a space of work and life blend.
Mm.
I don't believe in work life balance. I actually think that that is a myth. I think it keeps us feeling like we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to find balance. And
Mm.
I think that that keeps us in a space of overwhelm and anxiety.
Mm.
But what we can do is we can blend.
Yeah.
And that gives us the space for flexibility because sometimes our business needs more, sometimes our family needs more. What
Mm.
we need to do is manage our own internal dialogue. That inner critic can be very harsh.
Yeah.
I'm not a good enough mom. I'm not a good enough partner or wife.
Mm.
I'm not a good enough business person. I'll never be successful. I struggle with this myself. So,
Mm.
anyone that's listening, know that I have managed my own and
Mm.
continue to do so. And what we need to do is find a space where we can feel like we're designing and living our life and designing and operating our business from a place of authenticity.
Mm.
What is real and meaningful to me? Not to the business gurus, not to the the tech bros, or the multi-billionaires. What
Mm.
feels good and feels real and feels aligned for me? And that goes all the way back to my values. What do
Sure.
I care about the
Sure.
most?
Sure.
And then how do I build my life and my business
Mm.
around those things?
Mm. Great response. What system should founders put in place so the business does not depend on them for every decision?
These are really fabulous questions. I love this.
Mhm.
I think so. From my perspective, I certainly believe that there has to be systems in terms of our operations,
Mm.
how we do the work. But I also believe is equally important is a people system so that we are hiring the right people to do the right job at the right time
Mhm.
and giving them the right level of accountability. That
Mm.
means we need to be clear. We need to have a strategy. Who is in what chair? What are they accountable for? What does success look like?
Mm.
And where does their responsibility start to interact with someone else's? And what does the communication look like? When we can have clarity, when we can have an organizational structure and roles that make sense,
Mm.
then we can actually have a system. We can hire the right people to deliver, and we can start to extricate ourselves from the daily deliverables. And then we can go on vacation for 2 weeks
Yeah.
and not feel like our business is going to fly apart.
Mm. The other
It's about
aspect,
intentionality,
absolutely,
right?
very well said. But the other aspect that I've seen a lot of founders face is burnout.
Yes, of
How
course.
how should founders and leaders avoid burnout while continuing to drive ambitious growth?
Yeah. It's a tricky one because I think as entrepreneurs and founders, we are so passionate.
Mm.
We put our blood, sweat, tears, and most of our life savings into
Mm.
these businesses.
Yeah.
We put it all on the line.
Mm.
And so the impetus to overextend ourselves, to work nights, weekends, overtime, all
Mm.
the time, we're waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about our
Yeah.
business. And so, absolutely, listen, again, I have been in that space where I have hyper achieved in my
Mm,
business.
mm,
The truth is, what we need to do is
mm,
actually find someone who can help us examine that.
mm.
And so, I mean, this is the work I do as a coach.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have my own coaches, just to be clear. We need those people who can help us see where we are actually getting close to burnout before we can see it. You
Mm.
can't read the label from inside the bottle.
Yeah.
And so often we are not able to recognize when we are in that space of hyperachievement and borderline right on burnout. We need help.
Mm.
We need to recognize
Sure.
when we are giving up and compromising our other values.
Mm.
Family is a big one. When
Absolutely.
we are getting close to burnout, when we are hyperachieving as a business owner,
Mm.
often our values of family, our health and wellness we start to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Where are you sacrificing things? Where are you compromising for your business? And you need to pause and examine that. And
Mm.
you probably need an expert to help you.
Well said. I have time for
Yeah.
two more questions for you.
Awesome.
What does sustainable performance mean in practical terms for leaders
Mm.
and teams?
Oh, this is a good one. So when we think about sustainability,
Mm.
particularly from a people perspective, this is actually setting people up to
Mm.
feel like they are growing, they're learning, and they also have spaces of achievement.
Mhm.
Impact. We all want to feel like the work we do has value.
Mm.
Nobody wants to do work that's meaningless. So when we think about what's sustainable for people on our team and for ourselves, it's
Mhm.
about creating roles and giving people accountability and ownership
Mm.
at a level that makes them feel stretched. At the same time, they feel like there's success and fulfillment for them.
Mm. Mm.
And then moving the bar slowly but surely to
Mhm.
help them experience the growth and the learning that they want. And
Mm.
I think that that is universally true. I don't care where you live or what you do.
Yeah.
People want to feel like they're growing and growing in a way that they can actually achieve.
Mm.
If you set the bar too high, there's absolutely no reason for them to try. They just say no. If you
Mm.
set the bar too low, they just coast. And actually, that's unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is about constantly evaluating, providing high quality feedback
Mm.
so that they know what they're doing well, where there's opportunities for improvement, and what they can do next to do that.
Mm.
And if we do that for them and ask them to do that for us,
Yeah.
get feedback from your people.
Mm.
That is truly sustainable.
Very well said. And my last question for you, Lindsay. If you could give every founder one lesson about leadership early on in their journey,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I think about, myself as an early stage founder. I
Mm.
think about some of the early stage founders in my community and in my
Mm.
client roster. And the most important thing I think
Mm.
is actually get clear on your own values first.
Mm.
What do you care about the most?
Mm.
How do you define that? What does it mean for you?
Mm.
How do you live that in your daily life? Where are the boundaries that protect that?
Mm.
What's your purpose? What are you on this earth to change or deliver?
Mm.
Because that is going to impact the way your business is shaped and grown. It's going to be foundational for your culture
Mm.
and how you identify who's going to fit on your team and how you want them to show up.
Mm.
I think that that is the most meaningful and powerful work we can do really, really early. And I was lucky. I had a coach that helped me do that. And I love to do that for other early stage founders.
Amazing. And with these words of wisdom, understand your own values and your purpose. Thank you, Lindsay, for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for almost taking us through an incredible leadership and culture 101 for a lot of my
Thank
viewers and
you.
listeners. I think you gave us some very, very interesting points to think about. and to be able to keep coming back and listening to your conversation with me. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.